You may be wondering these holidays around the braai, hey, I can't remember, but what set off the US Trump administration in 2025 to punish South Africa with tariffs, a White House press ambush, and a ghosting at the G20 in Johannesburg? Well, not one factor, person, or organization are to blame for the supreme souring of relations between Washington and Pretoria. Instead, a disinformation war waged purely online using X and other social media sites worked in concert to drive a very disingenuous and completely false narrative that whites are being subjected to a genocide in our country. One account at the very center of it helped bring that narrative to the eyeballs of Elon Musk and thus the US president, and that was Twatterbaas. Well, joining us now to reflect on his expose of earlier this year of the man behind this very busy X Boer profile is our very own investigative journalist Carl Cohn.
To know when the next episode drops, hit the like, follow, and subscribe buttons on our YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast channels.
A special and genuine thanks to each and every one of you for listening, commenting, and sharing the lead on News 24 this year. With more than 150 episodes under our belt so far and broadcasting 4 times a week, that's Monday to Thursday, our show's racked up around 900,000 listens thus far. With our shared pursuit of quality journalism, we can continue to tell the South African story in truly unique ways in 2026. Happy holidays. Look after yourself, please. Buckle up and avoid drinking and driving. My name's Graham Robenheimer. This is The Lead, and this is the South African story.
Graham, thank you for inviting me back.
Yeah, absolutely. A winding down of 2025, if you will, a reflection, a chance to just chat on the hectic year that was. I know both of us are rubbing our eyes, just having to remember all the facts off the top of our head. But let's just, I want to do this quickly and just indulge me for a second. I remember when the expose came out, News 24 and yourself specifically, Carl, and Adrian and the editorial team accused of doxing Sebastian Jooste, the man behind the Twatterbaas account. I want you to, if you can, in some eyes into like a very short paragraph or a sentence, explain very importantly to our lead listeners straight off the bat why this story is within the public's purview and a journalist's necessary task to expose. Why?
Yeah, so number one, doxing would be revealing private information, personal information. We did not do that, other than the town in which he lives and some general biographical details. He actually posted far more intimate information that, was identifiable online himself. In any event, under the Protection of Personal Information Act in South Africa, there's something else that also plays a massive role here. It's called the South African Constitution. It guarantees press freedom. It guarantees certain exclusions from certain laws for journalistic the exercise of journalism. And in that vein, when we meet the public interest bar, when there is a public interest threshold that we meet in terms of revealing certain information, that is why we can publish stories with people's names in it when we accuse them of corruption, even if a court has not found them guilty yet, as long as we have all the evidence. In this case, we had all the evidence. We spoke to Mr. Jooste himself. We spoke to his attorneys. We never revealed any information that wasn't, that was personal or, that was supposed to be secret or anything like that. We took great care in making sure that we didn't publish his address. We didn't publish exactly where he lives now. And, despite what you might read online and what people have accused us of, we are very careful and sensitive to these issues. And I think that the number one indication that we did not transgress any of these laws or regulations is that despite a very angry response from Mr. Jooste's attorneys at the time, no complaint has been filed against any of the stories. No, criminal matter has been filed, and no civil matter has been filed in any court in the country as you and I are speaking now since April this year. So I think it's safe to say that we've acquitted ourselves of the rules and regulations quite well. Obviously, there is always going to be an ethical debate around stories like this, but with the increase in influence that social media has over our public discourse, our geopolitical discourse, we find that the public interest bar is met and that this story falls squarely within that.
Fantastic. And over the next 15 minutes or so, Carl, you're going to remind us exactly why that news hook was so pertinent and remains pertinent to this day. Take us to that very moment when you confronted Sebastian Jooste at his Gordons Bay guest house on April Fool's Day 2025. Was that deliberate, April 1st? Did you meaningfully choose that day, or was it by accident?
No. It was completely by accident. I was only supposed to go the week after, or if memory serves, and because there was a real fear that this person, once we had confronted them, would delete either the entire Twitter account or a whole lot of content. So I was still in the process of trying to preserve as much of it as possible and trying various methods to do that. And so it's quite difficult to actually preserve a whole lot of Twitter posts if you have to preserve the video or the images in it as well. And it just sort of turned into, logistically, it just happened on that day. And I think there was also questions around the availability of our photographer, Chelsea, and she managed to be available that particular morning. So, I got on the airplane and off I went down to Gordons Bay and didn't really knock on the door, pressed a button at the gate, but, I suppose that's the modern equivalent of knocking on the door. Okay,
he emerges. What did he think was happening? He probably felt, let me check the calendar. Why is it April 1st? And are these people out to get me? What's going on here? Take us through that physical interaction that you had coming face to face with the man behind the Twatterbaas account finally.
Yeah, so I mean, we'd obviously been looking at this account for a couple of weeks. So at this point, he comes out of the guest house. The front door is quite far away from the gate, and it took him quite a while to move from the front door down to the gate. So there was a little bit of an awkward, waving and talking in loud voices for a little while. And once I'd introduced myself as a journalist from News 24 and why I was there that day, I think the pictures actually show it, this politely incredulous look. I mean, Mr. Jooste was perfectly polite and courteous at all times, and I tried to be as well. These interactions are sometimes quite difficult for individuals, and also quite difficult for the journalists involved. It's a very tricky exercise. You have to state very clearly what your purpose is there and get something of value for the story, but also try and be completely fair to the subject of the reporting and try and elicit their version on the record. And we stood there for a little while and we chatted, and I tried to explain to him that I believe that he was the person behind the account. He showed me his cell phone, where the X app was not installed on his cell phone, in an attempt to prove that it was not him. He denied it completely. I then sort of walked away, and it was quite clear to me that he didn't have much more to say, and we sort of said our goodbyes. And I phoned my editor and gave him feedback on the interaction, and my editor immediately said to me, look, push a little bit more, try and just have a coffee with the man, try and just have a bit of a longer conversation with him. We tried that. He would not let us onto the guest house's property, but he did undertake to meet us at a cafe nearby. And very much the conversation at the cafe nearby, I was able to take out my computer and show him screenshots of some of the tweets, etc. And the denials, he maintained his denial. It wasn't him. It was at this point that I believe he started talking about, very quote unquote naughty friends, and that he suspected that maybe this was all a big prank, that they were using his old pictures from a Facebook page, etc. And we departed on terms that, he sort of gave an undertaking to put me in touch with these individuals. I said to him, well, look, if you believe it's your friends, will you help me find them so that I can talk to them and ask them why they are running this account and saying these things? After that, I've heard from Mr. Jooste, I think once or twice via WhatsApp, and thereafter all communication between me and him ceased, and it became communication between myself and his attorneys.
And the attorney revealed to you that, yes, indeed, my client owns this very account. So he lied to you when you guys had met.
He did lie, and I remember speaking to my colleague Chelsea, the photographer who accompanied me, after Mr. Jooste had left, and I remember her asking me, like, what do I think? And I remember saying to her, I think he's just completely lied to us. And after that, there were questions sent, written questions, and we sent the questions again after our own lawyers had checked them again. We were trying to be extremely careful and fair. And his lawyer then responds. Mr. Vian Spies was his attorney at the time, and he responded and said to us, yes, well, he does run the account, but he denied it for very good reasons. And I'm paraphrasing a bit, and we asked, sort of what were these reasons, but they weren't really provided. We never really got to the bottom of why he felt it necessary to first deny it and then only later confirm that he was the person running the account.
Yeah, very interesting. Let's tell our lead listeners, let's remind them. And of course, if you want to go back earlier in the lead catalog, you will find a more in-depth lead episode where we go through a lot closer some of the posts and some of the things that Sebastian Jooste had espoused. But I mean, a lot of the posts that he was sharing was, look, whites are being persecuted, farm attacks are spiraling out of control, specifically, in inverted commas, white people being attacked. A lot of these posts had very crude racism in a lot of them. They were amplified essentially at the end of the day because he had subscribed to one account, and that was, he subscribed to two accounts, but one of them was Elon Musk's. But Elon Musk was in fact seeing his posts. They were being amplified. So anything that he had to say about the state of South Africa from his point of view was reaching an unprecedented global stage.
Yeah, so Elon Musk is obviously the richest man in the world. He is also the owner of the X/Twitter platform. He also has the highest number of followers on the platform of any individual, over 200 million. And what was happening was, one post that particularly sticks out with me is Human Rights Day last year. Julius Malema sang the song Kill the Boer, a song that has, deep roots in the struggle against the apartheid regime, but also has become something of a very controversial touch point now because of the negative connotations around, farm murders that are happening. There are real people being murdered on farms, and some of them, yes, are white. And it's become a real sort of controversial song that is seen as ginning up controversy, as driving wedges in society, etc. And the video, I believe, was posted by another podcaster / commentator, Ronaldo Gous. And Twatterbaas, sort of quoted the post and said, well, look at this, And Elon Musk then immediately sees that because he is interacting so often with Twatterbaas's posts. He sees that and he quotes the tweet and he's talking about very few people know that a major political party in South Africa is calling for a white genocide, i.e. the murder of white South Africans. Now, Julius Malema himself has said, obviously, that's not his intent. He's not calling on people to go out into the streets and murder white South Africans. And, there have been court cases and litigation around this, and it's a very, very complex matter. It's not as simple as saying the song is bad or the song is good, and the singing thereof and the interpretations thereof. So it's a very complex issue. And what Elon Musk did is completely reductive. He reduces that to a singular narrative that is propagated online by those who believe in white supremacist tropes and all sorts of other issues that are quite sensitive.
With leaving out, obviously, and I just want to add this, Carl, leaving out the nuance that, of course, this is an apartheid era liberation struggle song.
Then Donald Trump screenshots Elon Musk's post in which Elon Musk is quoting Twatterbaas's post. Donald Trump screenshots that or, takes an image of that and publishes that on his own Truth Social. Now, immediately, this is the most powerful man in the world. The President of the United States has access to nearly unlimited resources in terms of intelligence, in terms of information. And he is taking information from Elon Musk's Twitter page and putting it out on his own social media as if it is fact. Now, the subtext here, of course, is that Elon Musk has been fighting to get contracts to put Starlink in South Africa. It's his satellite-based internet provider. And because of black economic empowerment rules in this country, he cannot just simply waltz in here and set these things up. There are regulations, there are laws, there are rules. And we can have a different debate about whether all those rules are fair or not and whether they actually serve their purpose. But the fact of the matter is until those laws are repealed, that is the law. And Elon Musk's second part of that tweet, in which he's talking about effectively saying there's a white genocide, he links that then with Starlink and his efforts to get in here, saying that he can't get that happening here because he is not, quote, black enough. And the connotation here is of course, the bigger picture is that there's persecution happening, that white South Africans are being persecuted against. And over the next couple of months, we, as Donald Trump assumed his second term in the White House, we saw that those sort of ideas, that sort of thinking that played out in this one interaction from Twatterbaas's, Twitter account to Elon Musk's Twitter account to Donald Trump's Truth Social page. We saw that interaction happening, and then we saw it morph into very real policy decisions that have affected the South African people and the South African economy negatively.
Yeah. In other words, out of all of this, there was quite a clear line of opinionated engagement between Twatterbaas that eventually reached Elon Musk's eyeballs, for then that to be picked up very easily by the US president, because obviously Musk and Trump were a lot closer than what they perhaps were later in the year at the time. Yes, one may argue on one side of the coin as well, Carl, that obviously singing Dubulubulu is certainly not helpful in the current context. On the other hand, obviously there's no concrete evidence that it's led to any one white person's murder. That's also the other side of it. And then, like I say, yes, obviously the historical songs sung within the context of apartheid is also lost within the nuance of sharing all of this. What ultimately did you feel like you learned out of the Twatterbaas story? Something that you perhaps would have done differently, if anything?
It's an interesting question. I obviously, there are those detractors and critics who immediately came out and sort of scoffed and said, well, if you really think that, all of US policy is driven by what Donald Trump sees on social media, you're deranged. And of course, we never made that claim. But it is very, very clear, particularly also after the meeting that Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, had with Donald Trump in the White House, that online misinformation does play a very big role in how this current US administration perceives issues, particularly in countries that they actually know very little about. South Africa is, I heard it described to me by a friend as a white supremacist's wet dream. And I apologize for the connotation of that term, but I think it is quite accurate. I think there are racially driven ideologues in the US who look to South Africa as an example of the worst that could happen if what they would call DEI, what we would call affirmative action and reparation and restoration of rights, they would call something different. And I think that in the reporting that we've done, that for me could have been highlighted a bit more. I think that there could have been maybe an accompanying opinion piece speaking to the dangers of this and delving more. I think that I often assume too much that all South Africans understand and know the context of our history and how that plays a role in how people conduct themselves today and how the laws that we have and the policies and regulations we have. I sometimes take for granted that people understand and know why these things exist beyond what they see on social media as, oh, it's just to persecute white people. And I want to be very clear. There are people in this country, white South Africans, who harbor a genuine perception of persecution. And that is for many different reasons. It is not just enough for us to dismiss it out of hand. But at the same time, we have to counter those feelings with the facts. And the facts are that, yes, white farmers are murdered. There is no evidence to suggest that it is anything other than crime that happens to all South Africans, except the context is in a rural area where access to policing is even worse than what it is in the cities. I hate that people seem to always perpetuate this myth that if you live in a town or a city, the police will assist you faster. Ask any person who lives in a town or a city how quickly the police are there to assist them sometimes. You will get varying answers, sometimes anywhere from a few hours to 15 to 20 minutes. So the majority of crime happens in our urban centers. And there is a lot of debate needed around this. And I think that the Twatterbaas stories could have approached these issues in a lot more depth and in a lot more detail. Of course, that's always the difficulty with journalism, particularly in the modern context. You have a very limited amount of time with someone's attention on a particular story. So you have to be extremely careful what information you put in a particular article. And what I have learned is that when you publish things like these, when you take people on like this, it is very rarely about the content. The criticism that comes back is very rarely about the content of the story.
Yeah, the substance.
There's almost always a narrative that is pushed around the story. News 24 is this, Kyle Cowan is that. I am none of those things that these people say, because in fact, none of those people even have the backbone to have a conversation with me about it before posting their criticism online, which is an opportunity we afforded Sebastian Jooste. But it has also taught me that criticism exists only online.
Yes.
The majority of people I've spoken to, even people whom I know are conservatives, who I know do not agree with the current government, or, they also don't agree with what's happening online, and they also don't agree with the content of Jooste's posts. So I've learned to take social media slightly less seriously.
Mm.
And, Graham, an important criticism of the story is that we didn't make it clear enough that Jooste is not alone in influencing US policy in South Africa. Of course, that's true. We never made that claim. But of course, we could have done more, I think, to make it very clear that we're not saying that this is the only reason Donald Trump is targeting South Africa. There are many, many reasons. And as you put it so eloquently in your introduction, the feeding into the ecosystem of this is what's important here. And Twatterbaas became the leading voice driving that connection, building that bridge between South African conservative commentators and the American conservative commentators online. And some of those accounts we've recently learned aren't even run in America. They run in Eastern Europe and other places. But yeah, I think that at the same time, the people who will tell you that social media cannot be the only reason why Donald Trump believes these things, and again, it's a claim we never made, these are the same people who spend their entire lives on social media driving narratives and posting falsehoods. So if social media wasn't that important, if what is put up there doesn't have a real world impact as they claim, why do they spend all their time there? And that's a message that I hope that particularly some of these anonymous accounts who continue to target News 24 and myself for this reporting, I hope that you will engage with that question and actually engage with the reporting before continuing to drive sort of nasty narratives without ever speaking about the fact that the person that you're defending in Twatterbaas and Sebastian Jooste is guilty of spreading not only falsehoods about the persecution of white South African farmers, but also clear and direct racism.
Because in the absence, 100%, in the absence, Kyle, and I had this question from, somebody who was interested in how the news operates over the weekend. I'm sure you get questions like this all the time, like I do. Yeah. And, I said one thing very clear. I can't go onto the lead without saying something that I need to ensure, especially if I'm going to listen back, that what I said was factual. I always check for my references in post. I always go back and I think, will this potentially lead me in front of the press ombudsman? We as journalists take that decision every day because we are governed by a set of rules. Twatterbaas, in the absence of the press, is governed by nothing. Yeah, he has 160,000 followers. We can see, gleaning the numbers in your excellent end-of-year piece, that Musk amplified some of Jooste's posts to around 87 million users. So that's a number that certainly dwarfs the 160,000 followers that his audience was eventually built to. And some 4.3 billion impressions is what came out of all of this. We can see that Elon Musk, thanks to this handy graph that Charlene, I think, helped you with, accounts that Twatterbaas interacted with more than 20 times between May 2023 to May 2025. Elon Musk is the top of that list. So Jooste published more than 5,400 posts in those 2 years. He interacted with nearly 2,000 accounts, and Elon Musk clearly comes out the top because Elon owns the platform, and I think he has the most number of followers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he does, and also has proved, Elon Musk has proved very susceptible to online conspiracy theories, and this sort of targeted tagging, this sort of targeted engagement with Elon Musk is deliberate. It's not because Elon Musk is a genuine activist for the South African people or any subgroup of South Africans. It is because of the reach and sort of influence that his Twitter account has. So it's very deliberate. It's very deliberate. It is audience farming. And that's why also this sort of behavior online needs to be called out and checked, because Elon Musk is not behaving in a responsible way in terms of the content that he promotes or puts out on social media to all of these followers. So if you have people who want to amplify a message, whether that message is true or false or somewhere in between, constantly tagging Elon Musk therein, hoping that he will engage with it and repost it, that is a deliberate attempt to, in some cases, spread misinformation to one of the biggest social media audiences in the world.
Yep.
And it's sinister.
And now, very curiously, as we end off, Kyle, did you see that since the 28th of April, 2025, there's not been a single tweet from the Twatterbaas account?
Yes, I saw that, and I found it quite interesting. We in recent days we've republished our impact reports, obviously for 2025, and amongst those is the Twatterbaas story, and I've written a piece to sort of go back over all of this, and there was some noise again on social media about it over the weekend, and it's interesting to me that a lot of the people who claim to support Twatterbaas and who claim to be standing with him in solidarity, they also claim that he's been in hiding. Now, I know for a fact that is no longer the case, that the guest house is continuing to operate as normal. There have been absolutely zero negative impacts in terms of investigations by the government or anything like that against Sebastian Jooste. The only thing that has happened is that he has stopped tweeting. And I think that is a good thing. I hope that wherever Mr. Jooste is, and if he ever listens to this, I hope that he will find a way to drive his activism in a way that doesn't include racism and misinformation. I get the idea from my very brief conversations with him and having spent hours upon hours trawling through all of his posts on X that he genuinely believes the things that he said. And I hope that he can find a way to be an activist without breaking down others. You can still fight for your cause without being negative about other people, without spreading racism and lies. And many activists in this country do that every day successfully. So I hope that in this is a lesson for all of us, in that online misinformation is no longer a joke. It's no longer just something fun to do on a weekend. Trolling is not funny. Posting, running an account that deliberately posts day after day, week after week, false and misleading information has real world impacts. And I say at the end of the piece that I wrote that we have yet to quantify this. We have yet to figure out exactly what the cost is, because how do you measure something that intangible? But as time goes by and the tariffs begin to bite and the South African economy continues to struggle, and obviously not only because of actions against the economy, but also because of poor policymaking from our successive ANC governments and even the current GNU government, I think that we will have to try and make these sums in the years to come. We will have to try and figure out what the effect was of this dalliance with, the insanity of the Donald Trump administration. It will come with time. But for now, I think we should all reflect on this and try and behave, I think, a little bit more courteously towards one another, particularly online, and try and be fosterers of good debate rather than just insults and ad hominem.
Yes. And also, X does not reflect the whole South African story. It's not an accurate reflection of everything that happens in South Africa. I would contest that no social media site does that. In actual fact, as a journalist, I find myself very much less on social media these days, as I feel like the real things that need to be spoken about, those very important stories that get put by the wayside because perhaps it's not forming a pre-formed narrative that somebody else has already about a certain topic. People just don't want to engage with it. They only want to live their own truths, and it's, again, a very big problem. Not everyone's like that, but especially the people who are still posting a hell of a lot on these social media sites are hoping for engagement on only what they consider to be their truths, and that's very problematic, I would argue. Okay, you may have heard this, Kyle. It's called Roby's Round Robin. It's 10 questions I'm putting to all of our News 24 cast of thousands as we end off the year that was. You don't know what the questions are going to be, but you're such a great investigative journalist that I know you're not going to have any issue answering them. I'm going to throw 10 questions at you. They've been meticulously picked. They're mostly news related, but they're fun and flippant. Are you ready?
Okay, hit me.
What's the one South African scandal you still want answers to in your lifetime?
The Gaddafi millions.
And that golden pistol. I wonder what happened to that golden pistol. Remember that?
I don't know where all that money went, man.
If you could put one politician on airplane mode for a month, who would it be?
Fikile Mbalula.
Which press conference in 2025 emotionally hurt you the most?
You know, as an investigative reporter, I don't attend many press conferences, but I watch quite a few of them on TV. And just today, there was a press conference by the president's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, where right at the end, the very important issues around football were discussed. And I kind of felt that our colleagues were letting us down by keeping it so light and airy.
Who's your favorite News 24 colleague? You've got to be biased.
Got to be biased. Jeff Wicks. I think him and I have worked together for the longest and tackled the same kind of stories, so we often find ourselves in the trenches together.
Which was the case when you guys went out to Brakpan just the other night, sadly,
Correct.
for the murder of the local crime fighter there, Marius van der Merwe. What's the one story in South Africa this year that deserved the Netflix docuseries treatment?
Pala Pala.
Interesting, because Pala Pala has been coming up a lot for a fair number of the other interviewees that I've had, but not necessarily for that particular question, which is I find quite interesting. Okay, which South African song would be the soundtrack to your journalism career thus far?
I don't know, something from a heavy metal band called Quibus. One of their chapters.
Yes, deep cuts there, Kyle. If you're forced to embed with one government department for a year, which one do you think you would survive the longest in?
Probably the South African Police Service.
Sure. Okay. Sure. If you like to take risks. You have one wish for South African journalism in 2026. What is it?
I want there to be more of us.
That'd be
More
great.
journalists.
Not more investigative journalists specifically, or just journalists in general?
More. We need bigger newsrooms again. We need more boots on the ground covering stories. Just more people.
Yeah,
That's all we need.
Absolutely, can't agree more. All Carl Cohen wants for Christmas is
a nice book and a glass of red wine and peace and quiet.
lovely. And then finally, fill in the blank. South Africa will officially be okay when
the ANC starts making policy that has some grip on reality.
What a way to end off 2025 is our intrepid investigative journalist Carl Cohen doing some absolutely fabulous work during the course of the year, whether it was the coverage of the murder investigation into Boer van Niekerk, whether or not it was exposing Twatterbaas. You've done some sterling journalism this year now. Very privileged to have you as a colleague. Thank you, Carl, and good luck for 2026.
Thank you, Graham. You're far too kind. All the best for you.
Remember, so long as there's trusted news first, you'll always have the lead on News 24. Here's to an epic 2026.